Greetings, this is Charles Darwin. In my autobiography, I said that the way I figured out natural selection was that one day I was reading Malthus's essay on population for amusement. Now that was intended as a joke, but it got out of hand, my biographers, then and now. This is just a small pile of them today. My biographers assumed I was serious, and now it's gotten interwoven into history. And it was too late for me to say, I was just joking, folks. But I'm going to come out and say right now, that was a joke, okay? And the thing that is most obvious about that is that nobody reads Malthus for amusement. Okay, but in the 21st century, we now understand there are at least 4 reasons why Malthus was incorrect. And the first is typological thinking. He was thinking mostly about the poor, and he assumed that all of the poor people were more or less the same, and that therefore the only way to control their populations was once they had surpassed their resources, they would die. And this ignores the fact that some people can figure out ways to create new resources. They can figure out ways to survive better than others. And so some of them will survive and some of them won't. But he assumed that when the population increases, they start dying as if they're all the same. Now, it was I who said, in my explanation of natural selection, I said that there was variation in populations. Not just human populations, but in natural populations. And if that were not the case, there could be no natural selection. If all of the members of the population were the same, there would be nothing for natural selection to select. But the only way to have natural selection is that some of the members of the population were better suited to the conditions than other members of the population. Well, that would still mean, however, that there would be a lot of death. And that brings me to the second point, is that Malthus's approach was very dismal. Okay, so he had typological thinking, and he was dismal. And that's also true of natural selection, because if only death controls populations, then that means that natural selection has to kill a lot of the organisms that are less well suited within the populations, so that the population can evolve. Now, I tried to put a smiley face on this. At the end of chapter 3, I wrote, "When we reflect on this struggle, we may console ourselves with the full belief that the war of nature is not incessant, that no fear is felt," I don't know how I could possibly know that death is generally prompt. I certainly knew that was not the case, but I wrote it anyway, and that the vigorous, the healthy, and the happy survive and multiply. I tried to make it sound good, but there's no getting around the fact that it's dismal. It was just as dismal as Malthus's approach. Well, the third one is that the Malthus approach is racist. And let me give you an example. I would teach when I was working as a professor about population growth, and that countries that have a rapid population growth also have a high fertility rate, and these countries tend to be poor and have high infant mortality. But you see, there's 2 ways to interpret that. You could say that high fertility rate causes illness and death, or you could say that illness and death causes high fertility rates. You might say, how is that possible? Well, what would happen is that if the people in a population would see that there was no way out of this, then they would have more children, hoping that at least some of them would survive. But actually what happens is when you give medicine, food, opportunities to the poor, their fertility rate does not increase the way Malthus would say, but it actually decreased. This is what has happened during the late part of the 20th century and into the 21st. We give a lot of foreign aid to help poor people. And Malthus would have predicted that would just cause the population growth rate to increase. As a matter of fact, that's what people like Colin Vaux and Garrett Hardin and Kenneth Boulding would say. But that's not what happened. We gave them aid, and their population growth rate decreased. Now, It's still increasing, but the rate of increase has gone down. And so I would tell this to my students, so they would still get it wrong. They would say, those countries like India and the countries in Africa, they have such a problem with poverty and infant mortality. That's because they're having too many kids. Even after I told them that that was not the correct answer, they would still answer that on quizzes. And so, and at the same time, a lot of these students believed that white people like them should have as many kids as possible. So you see, white people should have a lot of kids. The Quiverful movement won't admit that, but white people should have as many kids as possible, and dark people should not have so many kids. So that approach is racist. And finally, fourth, it's wrong. I'm happy to report to you that it's poverty that causes overpopulation, not the other way around. And one thing about human beings is, and this may be unique among all the species that have ever existed, we can plan and determine our future. We are not doing a very good job of that at this time, but we could. You give more resources to bacteria, their population will increase. They don't know any better. And you do that for practically any population in nature. But humans have intelligence, and we can say, you know, we can do better than that. Instead of having so many kids, we can have fewer kids, and then we can feed them better, educate them better. And that will make the world better. No other species was able to do that. And so, as it turns out, I'm leaving you with that little bit of good news. This is Charles Darwin. Tally ho and amen.